In this episode, recorded at Global Birdfair, author of Fledgling, Hannah Bourne-Taylor, shares her extraordinary experience of raising a young finch that had been abandoned by its flock, and which made its home in her hair. Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I take pleasure in watching the wild birds around me, wherever I am. In my show, I share the joy of birding. I tell you about the birds I've seen, speak with experts and enthusiasts, go on bird outings, and I share stories from birders around the world. In case you missed it, last episode I had a wonderful chat with the author and broadcaster Stephen Moss about his love for birds and the inspiration behind his series of bird biographies. Do take a listen. If you'd like to support the show's production, you can buy me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. My thanks to everyone who's bought a coffee so far this year. You can find the link to Ko-fi in the episode notes. I first heard about Hannah Bourne-Taylor earlier this year after the publication of her book, Fledgling. The news story is told of a woman who rescued a baby finch, a bronze-winged mannequin, that she found out of its nest after a violent storm. Hannah took care of this tiny chick for nearly 3 months before successfully returning it to the wild. Her amazing story touched my heart. I attended her talk at Global Birdfair and heard her speak passionately about her amazing experience, which I found incredibly moving. I wanted to learn more about Hannah's love for birds and was delighted that she was able to join me for a chat during the event. We're here at Birdfair and you gave a talk this morning about Fledgling, your book, and I was in floods of tears, and I knew I was going to be, but they were happy tears. Just hearing that story, it's just so moving. I will try not to get emotional while we're talking, can't guarantee it, but tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you start liking birds?
So I've always loved and watched birds, although really weirdly, I've never really considered myself a bird watcher, but I think that's partly because I've always done it in isolation. Although as a child, my parents would weave all the magical facts about birds just into our garden watching and things, so I kind of learnt without knowing. And it wasn't until I was 26 and I moved to Ghana, and my entire life changed overnight from central London living to living in the middle of nowhere, having no friends, a bit like COVID lockdown, like no purpose, isolated. And I just connected to the birds on a whole new level, to the point where they completely redefined my identity and changed my life. So no big deal. But yeah, just now, everything I do is for birds.
So a really amazing experience. And why do you think it was birds and not some other creature?
Oh, that's a good question. I think generally, birds, I feel, like kind of gatekeepers to wildlife. So they're always there. They're witnessing our lives, whether we realise them or not. But also, I've always loved birds. I mean, swifts were swifts are my favourite thing on this planet. And I think watching them as a child really cemented that awe-inspiring idea of a life and the flight thing and some of the magical facts that these birds are defined by. To me, that's just above anything else.
Now, you mentioned that you've always been intrigued by swifts and they're like your favourite species. Was that true even as a small child?
Yeah. But I think it's really obvious when swifts are around, their iconic calls and their amazing flights. But I think it was more than that, finding out those facts about how they fly all the way back to southern Africa, back to Britain without landing, and they can live for up to 22 years, maybe longer. And the fact that they're site loyal, so that we're living right next to them when they do finally come down to sort of our level. I just that is just amazing, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it breaks my heart to know that, because they're site loyal, coming back and then finding those sites are no longer there is just horrible. And there's so much that we can do, putting up swift boxes, putting up blocks in new builds to allow swifts to nest. There's lots we can do, and I know that's starting to happen, but I don't know that it's happening quickly enough for the swifts. I saw that this week they've been put onto the endangered species list.
November 2021 they were put on the red list, which is probably actually quite a good thing, because the fact that they're in the bottom now maybe makes people more aware of their plight, so maybe that could be seen as a horrible positive. But I think generally, if every bird lover took it onto themselves to try to make someone else a bird lover, or to create awareness about these incredible birds and how we can actually help them as individual people. And also maybe badger their councils to make sure that any planning that does happen with new developments involves Swiftbricks, then we could actually use our love for change.
I really like that, the idea of using love for change. And that was such a passionate ending to your talk this morning about how, our love of birds can translate to our love for each other and for the environment. It's just, there's so much love to go around, and we should absolutely use it for positive. Tell us about your experiences with this little fledgling.
Yeah, so Fledgling, my nature memoir, is really not a book. Obviously, it looks like a book and you read it as a book, but it is actually about a little swift and then a bronze-winged manakin finch fledgling. And both of those birds I rescued and then hand-raised and released. And obviously, it's not good to do that if you can help it. But I was living in the middle of nowhere, 3,000 miles away from sort of a sanctuary, and these birds would have died if I hadn't intervened. And in return for saving their lives, they just, well, I'm totally in love with birds. So if I concentrate on the bronze-winged manakin finch, it was a story that went viral when Fledgling was released. And I think a lot of people know about the story, but they don't know about the book necessarily. So there was a Guardian headline that went viral globally. And the headline was, "I let a baby bird nest in my hair for 84 days," which just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? I've got waist-long hair. And it's not an untrue statement, so it's even more ridiculous. But the thing is, it sounds like a stunt. And that's just not true. It wasn't a stunt. It was vital to the promise I made to him, the finch, that I would put him back into the wild where he belonged. And so that bond, that being together inseparably, physically, was vital to that happening. And I mean, the odds were always against me and him. And together we overcame so many obstacles. So for me personally, I'd had basically an identity crisis. So I'd gone bonkers. I had OCD, I've got pretty bad anxiety. And it all raised up when I found myself not able to work, no purpose, feeling isolated. Again, a bit like COVID lockdown for many people. And the bird, this finch, because I was trying to get him to be prepared to not die in the wild, and the context is obviously he's a tiny wild bird and he's a fledgling. He's basically a walking, flying snack. So he has to find a way to survive in the wild, and I had to help him do that. And so I had to stay in the present with this bird at all times. So it's a form of mindfulness, and it made me stop worrying and stop overthinking things. And I can't tell you how much I would love to prescribe the finch to pretty much everyone I know, because everyone has to deal with daily stresses in some form or another. And my remedy is go and save a finch's life, and your return is insanely cool.
I mean, you had to put an amazing amount of time into the care of this bird for a very short, intense period. But you had guidance, didn't you, from an ornithologist that you connected with online?
Yeah, I mean, when you say guidance, it was one email. And actually he said, it's a common afrotropic passerine. I'll just leave it. It doesn't really matter. And that's actually another theme of my book, is that through getting to know this individual bird, yes, he was a little brown job. So many people will be like, you could have, rescued some really cool bird in Ghana, and I've got this little finch. But actually he taught me that he's amazing. He had a personality that was enormous, and he was unique. And so every bird matters, every bird counts. And I learnt that directly from him. And I just think that it was worth it. And that ornithologist saying, it'll take you 12 weeks. Now, 12 weeks, I don't know, it depends what the context is. It was a really, really long time to have a bird living on your body. It's 1,000 hours together we spent. That's a lot of time trying to figure out how to eat without the bird following my knife and fork and trying to be swallowed by, he used to do that. I think he was jealous of the knife and fork. So when I was trying to eat, because I was using my hands and my hands were his castle, he would be like, "What are you doing?" So I would put a mouthful in, and there he would be flying into my mouth. Like, oh my golly. And, going to the loo, same thing. I'd put him down, obviously, because I don't want him to come with me. I would be really paranoid. So I'd be sort of hiding the loo seat so he couldn't dive into the loo. And these really, finch problems in a domesticated environment, really tricky. Then you go outside, and the finch problems become how we both don't get bitten by incredibly venomous, highly deadly snakes. So very odd spectrum of risks that we've had to face every day, and we made it.
It's such a courageous thing to do, I think. It's, it sounds on paper, wow, yeah, everyone would love to have a little baby bird that, but the practicalities are intense. It really did take over your life, and you dedicated yourself totally to ensuring that this bird made it back to its wild flock?
So I think it is a really big achievement, but it also it taught me something really fundamental that maybe everyone could use. So when it comes to the environmental crisis and conservation and anything to do with science, which often nature is kind of sort of cornered into, we think of clinical, detached things, and we think of very practical solutions, which obviously makes sense. But what we don't think about, what we sort of dismiss, is this idea of love. Love seems to be a bit of a dirty word. It's sentimental, it's a bit weak, it's a bit pathetic, it's too emotional. Well, actually, we're emotional beings. And if anything is going to save our planet from the crisis that we're facing, it is love, because love is incredibly functional. So nurturing is something that we do very well as a species, and passion is something that, especially the birding community has in spades. So if we can use that passion that we have inside us for these birds to make sure that our daily impact is a positive thing, or is certainly a neutral thing for them at least, and actually do something to try to protect them, then we can save the world.
That is really inspiring. It's just been absolutely wonderful to hear your story. I urge everyone to go out and get Fledgling and read about your story firsthand. And we look forward to seeing what is next on the agenda for you?
Well, I'm on a mission to engage everyone with birds, and I am writing another book all about how we can connect to the nature on our own doorsteps here in Britain. And hopefully it will empower everyone to realise the power of themselves. We might not be politicians or activists or scientists, but all of us, especially with our passion, passion is a superpower. Let's use that to the bird's advantage.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's been lovely to speak to you. I'm really pleased we got a chance to meet. And thanks so much for speaking on the Casual Birder podcast.
Thank you. I love the fact that you talk about the joy of birding because, being at Global Birdfair, it's so amazing to have an identity based on birds, go into a massive event and know that every single person here also love birds. It's like the coolest. It's like fuel, isn't it? It's so exciting to be here.
Is this the first time you've been to a bird fair?
This is not just the first time I've been to Global Birdfair. It's the first time I've ever met any fellow bird lovers or bird watchers. So for me, this is absolutely, I couldn't sleep last night. I was wired with enthusiasm. So yeah.
Fantastic. And you've still got another day of bird fair. Are you able to be here tomorrow?
Well, I'm not, because I foster crows and I can't leave them for more than a night. So I've got to go and feed my little goths that I've got waiting in Oxfordshire.
I don't know if you know, but I've got a rook friend, and so I'm kind of very into corvids. So let's just set us up for a future episode. It was such a delight to speak with Hannah. Her passion made me feel empowered, and that any action we take supporting the birds we love is important and meaningful. As Hannah said, every bird matters. You can find out more about Hannah at her website, hannahbourne-taylor.com. And do follow her on Twitter at @WriterHannahBT, where daily she tells about the first birds of her day and asks about yours. My thanks to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by The Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast.